Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, November 4th, 2015. I am Dave Biddle, and I am joined by the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. The first college football playoff rankings of the season were released last night. Ohio State checks in at number 3. Clemson is first. LSU is second. Alabama is fourth. Bax, your reaction to the Buckeyes being number 3?
I'm perfectly okay with it. In fact, if anything, I'm really happy that somebody is finally not telling them they're the number 1 overall team in the country. I think this team last year did so well with a chip on their shoulder. And the whole last 10 months, they've had people telling them how great they are. And while we've finally started seeing this team come together a little bit the last 2 games, I think right now, giving them some of that us against the world attitude is certainly going to be a welcome change from a team that's kind of just robotically gone through the motions for a lot of this season. So pick the Buckeyes third. That's fine. It does not matter if they're first, second, third, or fourth. We saw that last year. And if Ohio State wins its games, they're in, period. So third is fine by me. I was way more upset about the team that made it into fourth than I was about OSU being third. Give Urban some more motivating for these guys.
I absolutely agree. I wrote a piece last night, an analysis piece for the site, just saying, what happened last night really didn't matter. It was fun, but it wasn't very significant. It was completely insignificant. As you said, if the Buckeyes run the table, they're in. If they suffer a loss, they're in big-time trouble. There's a scenario they could get in at 12-1, but they just need to run the table. They're in, period. You mentioned you have a problem with number 4. Elaborate on that. Bama at number 4. I think a lot of people across the country, myself included, were very surprised to see the Crimson Tide at number 4. Give me your thoughts on that, Bax.
Well, first of all, how the heck is Alabama ahead of Michigan State when Sparty hasn't lost the game and their best win would be that school up north? That's better than any of Alabama's wins. I don't get that. To me, this is we really respect Alabama and they're Alabama, so let's put them in the top 4. I mean, look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's loss is by 2 points to the number 1 team in the entire college football playoff ranking and is on the road in a monsoon in a game that Notre Dame, frankly, probably should have won. And they're below Alabama? I mean, that's frustrating to me because Alabama has their best win is, I think, Wisconsin at this point. I think there's a couple teams that should be ranked ahead of Alabama at this point. You can make an argument, in fact, for Florida being ranked way higher than they are. Their only loss was at LSU. So with their new quarterback in after Will Greer got suspended. So I don't get Alabama. I don't understand why we're magically putting a team that lost at home to Ole Miss as the number 4 team in the country. If that was another helmet, if that was another head coach, you would not be seeing Alabama 4th. And the only plus side of it is at this point that is Alabama plays LSU this weekend. So if LSU beats them, then we're not going to be talking about Alabama in the college football playoff anymore next week regardless. Because let's face it, last year going into the playoffs, I think there was, maybe 1 or 2 undefeated teams the first week left. Right now we got like 10. So there's a lot to play out the last month. A lot of these top teams haven't played each other yet, which is crazy considering we're in November. But that's where we're at. And I think Alabama was given way too much credit by the committee. I would have put them around 6 or 7 myself.
Buckeyes received some good news yesterday. Urban Meyer announced on the Big Ten teleconference that Damon Webb is returning from what amounted to a 6-game suspension. Ohio State never revealed what the suspension was for, and Urban Meyer did not get into that. I do not anticipate that he ever will, but the good news for the Buckeyes is Damon Webb is back. He was the starting nickel for the first 2 games of the season, top backup corner, and was looking very good. It wasn't like he was just in the role and they would throw somebody in there. He was looking good. And since then, the Buckeyes have lost a lot of bodies back there. Cam Burrow's out for the year. Eric Smith out for the year. Marshawn Lattimore's had to step up as the number 1 nickel. Who knows if his hamstrings are going to hold up. I think he's really come along. I wasn't very impressed with him early in the season, but I thought he's played well the last few weeks. But this gives the Buckeyes much-needed depth. I don't know if Damon Webb's going to get his nickelback roll back right away, but I think he will eventually be the starting nickel. Bax, your thoughts on this? Damon Webb, this kind of came out of nowhere yesterday. Our sources had told us that they thought eventually Damon Webb would be back on the team this year, but we just hadn't heard anything in a while, and this is a very good news for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, this is a godsend for the defensive backs. I'll put it that strongly. Because I remember when Garyon Conley went out for a few plays at Indiana, and I was sitting there panicking thinking Marshawn Lattimore had to take over as one of our starting corners. once Webb gets back to full speed, I have enough trust in him that if one of the top corners goes down, I believe we'll still get very good play from our cornerbacks. Right now, if Conley or Apple gets hurt, we have to bring in Marshawn Lattimore. Well, I agree with you. He's played better the last couple of weeks. He still hasn't really shown that high level of ability like Damon Webb has. So getting Damon Webb back is incredibly big for the Buckeyes because they're so thin at the position right now. They literally can't handle an injury at the position right now, or they're playing a true freshman, which is something we want nothing to do with, especially with Connor Cook coming up on the schedule. So that's extremely good news for the Buckeyes. As for Webb coming back, you know, I know it probably was not what he wanted to have to deal with. I'm sure a lot of people were frustrated it took this long to get him back. But I also think Urban looked at the downside of letting him continue to play while the situation was playing itself out. And now that he's been sort of cleared of any wrongdoing in this situation, I think it was the right move because Urban, if this had turned out the other way, then Urban would have had a black eye on his program for playing a kid who was being accused of certain things. And now that that's gone, we're great. But if it had turned the other way, Urban would have been just castigated by the national media for being lax on discipline. And he's extremely sensitive to that, as we've seen here in recent weeks. So this is probably the right move for the program. I'm glad Damon Webb is back at practice, and I think it's working out the way Urban had hoped it would, that he'd be able to get Webb back later in the year without having to really go into the details of this whole situation. And it also works out that the situation ends where it did.
So they got some good news with Damon Webb. They also received some bad news yesterday, the Buckeyes did, although I don't know how bad it was. Kareem Walker decommitting. Nothing against the kid. I don't mean it wasn't bad in that he wasn't a good player. I just feel like it was inevitable, Bax, that Kareem Walker was going to decommit. I just felt like, you know, all of the drama with his recruitment when Ohio State then landed Antonio Williams. I said at the time the ship had sailed on Kareem Walker, in my opinion, and that came to fruition last night. Your thoughts, did you feel like this was inevitable? Do you feel like this is a big loss? Just what do you want to say about the Buckeyes losing Kareem Walker?
I think the writing's been on the wall with this one for months. One of my biggest rules in recruiting is that don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. If a kid says he's committed to OSU but he's taking all of his visits, then let's be real here. That was his plan from the start. Now, if a guy like Walker is just randomly showing up, like he showed up randomly at Auburn's campus at one point this year, at Arizona State's campus at one point this year. And honestly, if you're Ohio State, you don't recruit against Arizona State unless you're trying to take a kid out of Arizona. So to me, this was a situation where Walker committed at the high of all highs, the halftime of the national championship game, and he's a kid who's a very good player, but it seems to me like he put in his decommitment letter last night that the relationship had changed. Well, he's right. He hasn't treated this like he's committed to the number one team in the country, the defending national champions, the school that has churned out 4 straight 1,000-yard rushers. He made some comments about how he's more familiar. He likes the eye offense when he visited up in Ann Arbor. You know, it's some of the same old bad old crap we heard from a kid like Devion Smith when he was being recruited saying, well, you know, they don't really run the ball out of the spread as much as I'd like. That's an utter falsehood, and anybody who believes that at this point is kind of not paying attention whatsoever. I mean, hello, Carlos Hyde, Zeke Elliott, do you guys have eyeballs? But apparently that's the recruiting pitch that was being given to him by those guys up in Ann Arbor. And by the way, that seems to me like it's his most likely landing spot. So losing Walker stinks, but you knew exactly where Urban and company stood the second that they brought in Williams for an official visit. You knew Williams was going to commit because he decommitted from Wisconsin before he even came. This, to me, was a writing-on-the-wall situation for a very long time. And honestly, at this point, if you're OSU, one player will never make or break a class. And let's be realistic here, too. Remember in the past when Derek Green was the number one running back in the country, and everybody wanted Ohio State to get him, and they didn't understand why he was looking around, and, well, he's looking at Clemson, oh, he's looking at all these other schools. And Urban Meyer said enough of this crap and went out and got a guy by the name of Zeke Elliott. That worked out. While we look at the 5 stars next to Walker's name, and he's a very good recruit, we don't know how these guys are going to pan out in college. OSU went out and said, all right, we may not get that number one guy, so let's make sure we have a really good plan 1A right now. And that's what they have in Williams. If he's the guy, and then Urban believes that he's the guy, then that's great. And this is a loss. You can't say that it isn't a loss, losing the number one tailback in the country. But you know what? A lot of times, losing the number one kid sometimes turns out to be a blessing. We saw that with Derek Green. Maybe history will repeat itself.
Great insights from the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. Thank you, Bax. Programming note, we will get Urban Meyer after practice tonight for an interview. That'll be at 6:30 after practice tonight. We'll also get Kerry Combs and a few players, so look for a story and video on what Coach Meyer has to say. Look for stories, bolts, and videos on what Coach Combs and the players have to say. Thanks again to Matt Baxendell, and thanks to you for tuning into the show. I appreciate it and hope you have a great day. Take it away, best damn band in the land.